الذي قدر فهدى والذي أخرج المرعى فجعله غثاء أحوى سنقرئك فلا تنسى إلا ما شاء الله إنه يعلم الجهر وما يخفى ونيسرك لليسرى فذكر إن نفعت الذكرى سيذكر من يخشى ويتجنبها الأشقى الذي يصلى النار الكبرى ثم لا يموت فيها ولا يحيا قد أفلح من تزكى وذكر اسم ربه فصلى بل تؤثرون الحياة الدنيا والآخرة خير وأبقى إن هذا لفي الصحف الأولى صحف إبراهيم وموسى. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا الشمس كورت وإذا النجوم انقدرت وإذا الجبال سيرت وإذا العشار عطلت وإذا الوحوش حشرت وإذا البحار سجرت وإذا النفوس زوجت وإذا الموءودة سئلت بأي ذنب قتلت وإذا الصحف نشرت وإذا السماء كشطت وإذا الجحيم سعرت وإذا الجنة أزلفت علمت نفس ما أحضرت فلا أقسم بالخناس الجوار الكناس والليل إذا عسعس والصبح إذا تنفس إنه لقول رسول كريم ذي قوة عند ذي العرش مكين مطاع ثم أمين وما صاحبكم بمجنون ولقد رآه بالأفق المبين وما هو على الغيب بضنين وما هو بقول شيطان رجيم فأين تذهبون إن هو إلا ذكر للعالمين لمن شاء منكم أن يستقيم وما تشاءون إلا أن يشاء الله رب العالمين. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
For the love of the Holy Prophet Muhammad al-Mustafa, one loud salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. If everyone can kindly open their Qur'ans to the following two verses. The first one that you will need is from chapter number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273. Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273. And the next one that you will need is from chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 61. Sorry, verse number 60. Verse number 60. So Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 273, and Surah At-Tawbah, verse number 60. For the love of our fourth holy Imam, Zainul Abidin, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli. And to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the hastening of the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi, عجل الله تعالى فرج الشريف. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين سيدنا الممجد بشير المصدق المصطفى الأمجد محمود الأحمد أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنة الله على الظالمين من الأولين والآخرين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل فريضة من الله والله عليم حكيم. آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم awaited Savior of humanity, Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam, my respected teachers, elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum jami'an wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أضم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا أبي عبد الله الحسين صلوات الله وسلامه عليه. Continuing on in our series looking at the strategy of our fourth holy Imam Zainul Abidin salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, in reviving Islam after the event of Karbala. The foundation or the premise of our series has been the hadith of the sixth Imam alayhi salam, where he describes the Shia between the periods of the fourth Imam and the fifth Imam by saying, Hum لا يعرفون مناسك حجهم وحلالهم وحرامهم. That the Shia didn't even know the basics of their time. They didn't know the manasik of their hajj. They didn't know their halal and their haram. But by the end of the very same hadith, Imam alayhi salam says that the Shia had grown so far from the period of the 4th and the 5th Imams alayhim salam, that the Shia had grown so far that the people, the awam, the non-Shia, were reliant on the knowledge of the Shia to the same extent as previously the Shia were reliant on their knowledge. This is an incredible exponential growth that took place over the span of only 2 Imams, over the span of around 40 years of Imamate. Our series has been thinking about how this movement took place. We mentioned in one of the previous discussions that the first thing that the Quran did was give space for freedom of speech, freedom of thought, and freedom of religion. And that Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam had to re-invoke that, re-inspire people in Kufa and in Sham with the ability to speak out against the tyrants of the time, without which there would have been no opportunity for people to move past the way in which Banu Umayyah had such domination over them. Last night we mentioned that, again, going back to the methodology of the Quran, that one of the earliest movements that the Quran created was the idea that when there was a particular sin or challenge within the community, the Quran revealed verse after verse after verse to be able to respond back to it. And the character of the Prophet ﷺ enacted those verses in various different sittings. So by virtue of his personality and his behavior, he not only taught how to change, he inspired change, but he was the example of what people ought to be. And so people weaned themselves off those bad characteristics by virtue of the consistency of the revelation of Quran and the movement of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We gave the example yesterday that in the period of Banu Umayyah at the time of the 4th Imam, they sought to be able to re-institutionalize a part of Jahiliyyah. And that part of Jahiliyyah was what? Racism. That part of Jahiliyyah was sectarianism. That part of Jahiliyyah was extremisms and classisms between the people. We mentioned yesterday that when they used to walk past the janazah, Banu Umayyah would say, "Who is the dead person here?" And if it was a Qurayshi, if it was an Arabi, then they used to mourn over that person. But if it was a slave or a non-Arab, they used to mock and say, "Yeah, God takes what he wants and he gives what he wants. What difference does it make to us?" And this re-institutionalized the period of Jahiliyyah and the tribalism. Why? Because Banu Umayyah wanted a divided ummah so that if there was classisms, then they could place themselves at the top of that class. This would reinforce the system of power that they wanted to create. We mentioned various ahadith yesterday from our 4th Imam alayhi salam, where, like the Quran, like the Sunnah of the Prophet, he doesn't just speak once against this. He is consistently pushing back against it, moving time and time again to shift the way in which people think and try to change the behaviors and the understandings of people at that time. Had the Imam just given one sermon, or not practically demonstrated it within his own behavior or within the behavior of his household, then nothing would have changed. But the fact that the Imam was consistent throughout a lifetime of pushing back over a period of years, this is how the people could know the difference between the policies of Islam and the policies of Banu Umayyah. The takeaway was what? In our own communities, when you have a particular challenge, when you have particular corruption that is present, when we need to overcome something, it cannot be that we just think that it suffices that maybe we invite Maulana once and he talks about it once from the pulpit and you don't see him again for 5 years. A community requires a strategy. A community requires a consistency in responding to those matters, resolving those challenges within the society, without which it will just be a one-off and nothing will change, or maybe even something will get worse because we haven't plugged the hole or we haven't responded to that challenge. And this was the fourth Imam, Zain al-Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Tonight's discussion, inshallah, is rooted in the notion that builds off from last night's discussion. Not only is there a need of a consistency in pushing back on something to resolve it, we also need to understand that from year to year, decade to decade, the circumstances in which we exist in also change, and therefore the way in which we need to be able to respond also changes. Nothing in this world remains. Everything develops and moves. Challenges come, challenges go, opportunities come, opportunities go. And the Quran shows us that as the movement between Mecca to Medina took place, over the span of 23 years, the opportunities that were present to the Prophet also continued to develop and open up. The Quran wasn't stagnant in this way. When there was an opportunity, the Quran revealed a verse and gave to us this response and said, now act in this way, or put your efforts in this space, or put your money and power into this place. And then as years developed, the Quran would respond with another ayah and say, now put your efforts in this space. Now put your wealth in this place. It cannot be that the Quran is stagnant. The same way in your own lives, you are not stagnant. You realize that at high school, you are studying something particular. Then you gain that knowledge, you move past it, you go into college, you are now studying something higher, something more detailed, something that is going to lead you to something new. Or if you're an investor or you are a business person, you're always looking for different opportunities. The world around you is never stagnant. You have to be able to put your money into different places. Sometimes you diversify. Sometimes you put your money into one particular area. Why do you do that? Because you understand that the world continues to develop. What we failed to understand similarly as a community is that as our needs also develop, as our community grows, as the circumstances around us grow, we also need to be able to shift the way in which we are producing a community. That our efforts move from this place to this place, our wealth is invested in this place to this place, our time is spent focused on this opportunity or this problem. We often remain very stagnant as a community and imagine that just by virtue of us putting on majlis after majlis after majlis, that this is something that resolves the problems of the community or gives us the opportunity to invest and grow the community in every way. It is obvious that this doesn't work. It is obvious that just majlis for the sake of majlis is not actually going to change the community. That should be obvious by now. Because if that was the case, then that's how the Prophet would have done it. If that's the case, that's how Amir al-Mu'mineen would have done it. If that's the case, that's how Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam would have done it. But every year and every decade and with every Imam, opportunities changed. And similarly, the direction by which the Mu'mineen were invited to invest also changed. As normal, we will always show you this from the Quran, and then we will show you, inshallah, from the Sunnah of our fourth Imam, Zain al-Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Please open your Qur'ans to Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter number 2 of the Holy Qur'an, verse 270. Which one? Verse 200 and? Ahsantum, jazakumullah khair. I'm only doing it to make sure that you're awake. Everybody has the ayah, inshaAllah? The context behind this ayah of the Qur'an is the following. When the Muhajirin, the refugees of Mecca, migrated to the city of Medina al-Munawwarah, the Ansar gave half their wealth away towards the Muhajirin. But in addition to this, the Muhajirin had lost much of their business contacts around Arabia. Do you recall in Mecca that this was much more of a trading-based community, much more of a business-based community? You remember that? They used to travel across the whole of Arabia. They used to go to Yemen, they used to go to Syria, and Mecca was a central hub for businesses to come into and out of, because it was one of the largest marketplaces in the world at that time. Medina al-Munawwarah, however, was not a market in that way. It was more agricultural. It was more based on farming. It much more based on natural produce as part of its economy. So now I want you guys to imagine that you are Mecca and the sisters here are Medina. When you migrate to Medina al-Munawwarah, the Quraysh placed embargoes, sanctions upon you, and tried to prevent those from around Arabia from trading with you. So instead of you being able to have your business contacts in Yemen or in Syria or in Rome or in Persia, they blocked you from being able to move around the land. Because every time you tried to migrate, every time you tried to go and do some trade in a different region or a different city, the Quraysh had placed sanctions upon you and stopped you from being able to do any trade with them. Now you can imagine in your own world, if that was the case, how much that would stop you from being able to progress. In order to be able to assist you, you had already lost so much. You had already lost your houses in Mecca. You'd lost your businesses in Mecca. You'd lost much of your family in Mecca. Now when you arrive inside Medina al-Munawwarah, in order to start to get you back on your feet, from an economic perspective, what do you think in terms of the reality of the circumstance? What do you think the reality was? What do you think that the Quran and the Prophet encouraged to take place? Help each other. But specifically, he encouraged that the Ansar invest in the Muhajirun. That the Ansar invest in such a way that the Muhajirun get back on their feet. They are financially capable of evading those sanctions. Or that you share businesses with one another. So that instead of you not having any business contacts, no startup capital, no ability to get yourselves back on your feet, the Quran revealed an ayah and addressed the Ansar of Medina and told them, invest in the Muhajirin from Mecca so that both of you are able to get back on your feet together. Have a read of the ayah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. للفقراء الذين أحصروا في سبيل الله لا يستطيعون ضربا في الأرض. Charity, investment are for the fuqara, for the poor, who don't have the opportunity to move about the land. Why didn't they have the opportunity to move about the land? Because the Quraysh had placed sanctions upon them. The rest of the Quraysh had stopped the rest of the regions and their marketplaces from trading with you. And so Allah revealed a verse to say to the people of the Ansar, You need to be able to put your efforts and your money and your time into this group of people. Otherwise, inside Medina al-Munawwara, there will be too great of a difference. The Ansar will be rich, the Ansar will be in steady income, and the Muhajirin will not have anything. In order to be able to equalize between yourselves, you need to be able to invest your money from here to there. Do you understand? So where there was a circumstance, where there was an opportunity, the Quran responded to it and guided where the efforts, where the time, where the wealth of the community ought to be in order to be able to help that particular opportunity come to fruition. Everybody understand? Turn to chapter number 9, Surah At-Tawbah. Which ayah? Verse number? Verse number? 60. This verse is revealed 10 years later. How many years later? 10 years later. This means that the wealth of the ummah has increased, the power base of the ummah has increased, and therefore even the opportunities for the ummah have also increased. In the same way that as the wealth of the ummah increased, Islam demanded that the wealth and the investments by the community also diversify to reflect the needs of the society. Everybody understand? Have a read of the ayah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم إنما الصدقات للفقراء. Previously in chapter 2 verse 273, which group were you told to invest in? The fuqara. Now Allah actually doesn't give one category of people where you are supposed to invest. It gives 8 categories of people and needs that the community need to be able to invest in. إنما الصدقات للفقراء والمساكين والعاملين عليها والمؤلفة قلوبهم وفي الرقاب والغارمين وفي سبيل الله وابن السبيل. 8 categories by which the ummah was expected to invest their wealth into. In year 1 in Hijrah, 1 category was being mentioned. 10 years later, 8 categories are being mentioned. Look at them. This sadaqat, this investment is for whom? The poor, the needy, the officials who work full time for the ummah, those who can be united in truth, those who need ransoming as captives, those who are overburdened by debt, those opportunities in the way of Allah, and the traveler that gets stuck on his way. Can you see? As the waqi' changed, as the reality on the ground changed, the ayat also began to shift, and the way they directed the ummah also changed. This is the sunnah of the Quran. The greatest challenge to our communities is not understanding how the Quran works. How long have the community been here in Atlanta? When did we first move here, mashallah? 35 years ago. When you first came to Atlanta 30 years ago, 40 years ago, the situation was very different. Would that be a fair statement? Probably there was not even a halal restaurant. Fair? Now, mashallah, I've already been to about 8. And I've only been here 4 days. So I'm having breakfast, lunch, and dinner. True or not? Yeah? So tell me something. Do you need any more halal restaurants? Yes or no? Brother at the back, he's like, yeah. He's like, yeah, man. That deli, it hit the right spot, but there's another spot to hit as well. Think about this very carefully. In terms of the needs of the community, have the needs of the community grown over 17 years, over 35 years? Yes or no? Has the wealth of the community grown over 30 years? So how can it be that the waqi' has changed, but our thinking about where we put our money has not changed. Where we started 40 years ago, 30 years ago, there were a set of circumstances. Now, 30 years later, the set of circumstances have changed, the opportunities have changed, therefore, God demands something different from us. It is obvious. The Quran shows you that in year 1 after Hijrah, the needs were X, invest here. 10 years later, the needs were A, B, C, D, E, F, and G, invest here. And this is where we need to move to very, very quickly. That the fact that God has blessed us as a community with so much opportunity, so much wealth, that we don't think like we were 35 years ago, but we actually think in accordance with the waqi' and the challenges of the time. If you understand this from the Quran, and this is the sunnah of Islam, the sunnah of how a community ought to operate and how it needs to be constantly moving and growing and shifting and investing and changing in accordance with the challenges, let us come to the example of our fourth holy Imam, Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. We mentioned yesterday that Banu Umayyah had 3 principles about their accursed government. One, it was rooted in ilhad. It was rooted in atheism. They did not believe in Islam whatsoever. Number 2, it was rooted in corruption. All they wanted to do was spread corruption. And number 3, it was rooted in bringing people back towards Jahiliyyah. And this is what their whole period was characterized by. Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam had 4 decisions to make. 1, he could be completely silent and not do anything. Number 2, he could raise the sword like his father, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. Number 3, he could open up a center of learning. Number 4, he could actually change the way in which people understood and the way in which they acted by virtue of the demonstration of the sunnah of Islam. In regards to the first, not doing anything, this is not possible. In regards to raising the sword, it would not have been possible either. He would have been slaughtered immediately like his father, salamullahi alayhi, was. In regards to having a project of learning and opening up a university, it was not prime ripe to be able to do so. There was not even any learning allowed at that time because of the way in which Banu Umayyah was. This was something that would come with the 5th and the 6th Imams alayhim as-salam. And so he knew that he had to be able to shift over a period of generation. Now I want you to understand that with every period in the 4th Imam alayhi salam, opportunities and circumstances shifted and changed. Tell me, how many caliphs were there during the life of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam? How many? There were 5. Who was the first? Who was the first caliph during the imamat of Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam? Yazid ibn Muawiyah. You all know what Yazid was like. I don't need to expand. Who after him? His son Muawiyah. Was Muawiyah like the rest of Banu Umayyah or not? No. He openly declared that Banu Umayyah were corruptive, openly explained that what they did was wrong. And so in those few months of Muawiyah ibn Yazid, Imam as-Sajjad alayhi salam had more space. After him, who comes? Marwan ibn Hakam. After Marwan is whom? Abdul Malik ibn Marwan. And after him is whom? Walid ibn Abdul Malik. the Imam himself used different ways and opportunities during each of the 5 caliphates in order to be able to spread the message. The same way the Quran told us, invest your time, your money, your opportunity, your wealth here, and then also do it differently here, because your situations had differed. Even during the time of the 4th Imam, when Khilafat differed, when opportunities differed, the Imam alayhi salam actually used those opportunities in a different way. And this is something that we urgently need to understand for our own communities as well. How many of you have heard of the Kaysaniya movement? The Kaysaniya movement was a movement of Shia that believed Muhammad al-Hanafiya was the Imam of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. Who can tell me who is Muhammad al-Hanafiya? Son of whom? Imam Ali alayhi salam. The Kaysaniya movement believed that the imamate went Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, and then Muhammad al-Hanafiya. And so they declared Muhammad al-Hanafiya the Imam of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. Muhammad al-Hanafiya didn't believe he was the Imam, but the Kaysaniya movement insisted that he was the Imam. Now think about this very carefully. During the period of a Khilafat like Marwan, this man is so evil and treacherous, he is amongst the most akhbath, the most khabith individuals of Banu Umayyah. If he saw that there was a fight for imamat of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam, the moment one of them declares themselves Imam, what would he have done? Ahsant. What was that? Kill him. Yeah? So think about this. Could Muhammad al-Hanafiya accept imamat? Yes or no? Yes or no? No. Could he accept imamat? No, he'll be killed. Could Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam declare imamat of the whole of Banu Hashim? Yes or no? No. But there's 2 rivals in the Shia arguing and fighting and trying to say, this is Imam. No, this is Imam. No, you must follow this Imam. No, you must give your khums to this Imam. No, you must pay allegiance to this Imam. Think about it. If you are Banu Umayyah and you're watching this take place, you know the moment Banu Hashim unites behind one Imam, you know that's your enemy. What do you do to him? You kill him. Or you put him under house arrest. So what happens? How does Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam navigate this? Can you see the problem? Understand that the opportunities were differing times. Opportunities were at different stages. The Imam had to use different ways to be able to establish his movement, and different opportunities in different ways. What did the Imam do? The Imam suggested to Muhammad al-Hanafiya and said to him, don't make this about imamat. Because the moment you and I argue, or our Shia argue about imamat, a divinely appointed position, against the caliph of the time, then immediately one of us or both of us are going to be killed. What we have to do in order to both resolve the dispute amongst Banu Hashim, amongst the Shia, but also keep our lives, but also keep the momentum going against Banu Umayyah, is that we have to be able to make it as if it is a difference of opinion in a tribe. It's a tribal dispute. How do you do it? How do you ensure that the imamat is resolved, the tribal dispute is resolved, but also to ensure neither of them are going to be slaughtered at the hands of Banu Umayyah? Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam had a suggestion. He said, gather Banu Hashim. Let us take them all to the Kaaba and we ask Hajar al-Aswad to decide who is the Imam of Ahl al-Bayt alayhimus salam. So they all go. And Imam says to Muhammad al-Hanafiya, you go first. And everybody is standing there watching. Now I want you to imagine, when you go to the Kaaba, are there only Shia there? Yes or no? Who else is there? Non-Shia. They'll be there in their thousands, won't they? Imagine. Muhammad al-Hanafiya stood in front of Hajar al-Aswad. And the narration says, he asks, am I the leader of Banu Hashim? Am I the head of this tribe, of this family? Hajar al-Aswad stayed silent. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam stepped forward and asked Hajar al-Aswad in front of Banu Hashim, in front of the Shia, in front of the non-Shia, in the whole area of the Mataf, and said, am I the leader of Banu Hashim? The narration says that Hajar al-Aswad announces as a voice and responds, indeed you are the Imam of Ahlul Bayt, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. Everyone around heard. Everyone around understood the position of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam and immediately resolved the difference of opinion in imamat, in leadership, and also managed to keep themselves safe by virtue of this miraculous incident. Imam alayhi salam tried extremely hard to emphasize into the Shia at that time that they need to have ma'rifah and insight in the times in which they are working, as opposed to just working blindly and without the reality of what they were trying to achieve. This is something I'm trying to emphasize to you, that it cannot be that our communities move forward by simply thinking that by providing majlis after majlis after majlis is actually something that takes our community forward. It isn't. There needs to be a vision for where the community wants to be in 10 years' time. There needs to be a strategy that helps us get there. The community needs to be aware of that strategy, buy into that strategy, participate in that strategy, so that collectively united we move forward in those particular directions. Listen to these hadith from Imam alayhi salam and understand, if you were there at that time, how you would have taken these hadith in the context of the various different challenges and circumstances. Hadith comes to us from our fourth Imam, Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhi. إياك ومصاحبة الفاسق فإنه بايعك بأكلة أو أقل من ذلك. Incredible hadith. Beware, take care, avoid the companionship of a fasiq, because he would be willing to sell you for a morsel of food or even less. Be careful. Have ma'rifah, insight of what you're doing, whom you're with, whom you're working with. Understand where you're going. Because without that ma'rifah, you won't have anywhere, you won't be going anywhere in terms of your progress. إياك ومصاحبة الأحمق فإنه يريد أن ينفعك فيضرك. Take care, beware, not to acquire the company of a foolish and witless person, because he wants to benefit you, but actually he harms you. إياك ومصاحبة البخيل فإنه يخذلك في ماله أحوج ما تكون إليه. Take care not to acquire the companionship of the miser, because he will deprive you of his wealth when you need it. إياك ومصاحبة الكذاب فإنه بمنزلة السراب يقرب لك البعيد ويبعد لك القريب. Take care not to acquire the companionship of a liar, for he is like a mirage that deceives you. He shows you the thing that is near as actually distant, and he tells you the distant thing is actually nearby. Incredible. If you understand, Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam was trying throughout the period of his imamate to help people understand the situation by which they were living in, and not to fall without having ma'rifah of what they were doing. I ask you a simple question with humbleness and honesty. What is the 10 or 20 year plan for JC? What is it? Do we have one? Do you know where you want to go in the next 10 or 20 years? Is it mapped out? Have you got a budget for it? Have you got a vision for it? When people enter into the mosque, they have a pamphlet of knowing where they're going. Do you know what the challenges are? Hands up, what is the percentage of you that prays 5 times a day? What is the percentage of you that pays khums? What is the percentage of you in poverty? What is the percentage of you in higher education? What is the collective wealth of this community? How much money are you giving away every single year in interest? Where is the plan? Genuinely, are you still practicing as a community as to what you were 40 years ago when you came here? We have to build a mosque and just give majlis after majlis after majlis. Is this what the Shia of Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam do? The Quran showed us that at every year and generation the opportunities changed, therefore the needs of investment changed. I'm not speaking from me, I'm showing you what the Quran and Ahadith show you. I asked you earlier on, how many different halal restaurants do you have? MashaAllah, you have so many crisscrossing across the whole. Let me ask you this, genuine question. How many Shia bookshops are there in the city of Atlanta? How many? So why is it that the Sunnis have bookshops but you don't? How many Shia banks are there in Atlanta? You have 17 centers. How many Shia farms are there providing you with tayyib and halal meat? So after 40 years, is your whole project just to put on another majlis on Thursday night? Is this where we've reached? This is where we've reached. We really need to start thinking about what our community is doing and where it's going over the next 10 years. MashaAllah, I look inside the car park, everybody has opportunity, you have a lot of people being very successful. We need to pool that knowledge. We need to pool that wealth. We need to pool those ideas. And we actually need to have a direction by which we are going. Our fourth Imam, Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh, did not work in a random way. He had a strategy by which he was going to change the community over the span of 20 years. And he took it to the level by which the Shia became so knowledgeable that even the non-Shia became reliant upon their knowledge. Do you think the Imam achieved that by just randomly holding majalis in his house? No. Do you think the Imam achieved that by simply giving sermons? Do you think the Imam achieved that by having a strategy in place of where the community was going to go? Which one? Which one? The strategy. It is befitting of us that if we want to actually make benefit from Ayyam Sajjadiyah, is that we also take from the strategy of Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam. In every other part of your life, it will be unacceptable to not have a strategy. All of you, many of you have businesses here. If any of you have businesses, you don't know where you're going in the next 12 months? You don't have KPIs and goals for the next 5 years? No, you do. But when it comes to the Husayniyah, why don't we have exactly the same thing? One last hadith from our fourth holy Imam, Zainul Abidin, salawatullah wa salamuhu alayh. And I would like you to open your phones and actually write this hadith down in your notes section in English. I will read it to you in the original, in the Arabic, and I will translate it for you. And I want you, as your homework, all I want you to do is the following. Read it 3 times tonight and spend 5 minutes thinking about it. That's all I want. Sit on your bed, prop your pillow up, sit on the couch, sit on a seat. Today, tomorrow, all I want is for you to read it 3 times and think about the hadith for 5 minutes. That's all I ask from you. Listen to this hadith. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam says this, Ya Aba Khalid, one of his companions, Aba Khalid, Inna ahla zaman ghaybatih. The people in the era of the ghayba. Inna ahla zamanu ghaybatih. Al-qa'ilina bi-imamatih. They are the ones who testify to the imamat of the 12th Imam. وَالْمُنْتَذِرِينَ لِظُهُورِهِ. And they are actively awaiting his dhuhur. أَفْضَلُ مِنْ أَهْلِ كُلِّ زَمَانٍ. The period of the Shia of the Ghayba, who testify to the Imam's imamat, who are actively awaiting the Imam's imamat, أَفْضَلُ مِنْ أَهْلِ كُلِّ زَمَانٍ, are better than the people of every other era. That's you. MashaAllah, that's you. You are the people of the ghayba of the 12th Imam. You are better than every single other era. Why? لِأَنَّ اللَّهَ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى أَعْطَاهُمْ مِنَ الْأُقُولِ وَالْأَفْهَامِ وَالْمَعْرِفَةِ. Because Allah has given them aql, intellect, wal-afham, understanding, wal-ma'rifa, insight. The reason why the people of the ghayba are the best from all the history of Islam is when they have fulfilled those 3 conditions. They have aql, they have faham, and they have ma'rifa. They have insight as to the way in which they are working. When we are a community devoid of vision, strategy, devoid of understanding where we are taking the community next, what the needs are, where our investments are going, we do not reach that standard of being afdalu fi kulli zaman. But the moment we finish these 3 conditions, we have these 3 conditions, Imam alayhi salam calls up afdalu min ahli kulli zamanin, the best people from every era. All I want from you tonight, inshallah, as your homework, is to reflect upon this hadith and understand that when we want to reach that level of being the best community, there needs to be wisdom and direction by which we are taking the community. Without that, we do not reach that standard. And when we start thinking about that hadith, it'll open up doors of questions, doors of insight that you and I then need to be able to come together and actually start making a move in how we take the communities forward in the next era of our own selves. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam used multiple strategies to be able to spread the waqi' of Karbala. Look at how many different narrations you know about how the Imam spread the events of the 10th of Muharram. Sometimes he would host a lunch. Every day the Imam would host a lunch and people would come to the house and there he would talk about what happened in Karbala. On another occasion, we mentioned in the Gham yesterday that when there was a celebration, the Imam placed as a shart that someone recited the masa'ib of his brother Aliun al-Akbar. And imagine when Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam went into the marketplaces and he would see a butcher slaughtering an animal. He would come to the butcher and say, "Oh man, tell me, did you give water to this animal before you killed it?" And the butcher would say, "Yes, of course, Yabna Rasulullah, I have given water to this animal." He would then weep and cry and he would say, "My father was not given water before he was killed on the 10th of Muharram." I want you to take yourselves back to the 10th of Muharram. I want you to imagine Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam crying out for that water. I want you to imagine that Imam is on his horse. They have showered him with arrows, so many arrows that when he falls from his horse, it is the arrows that touch the ground before it is the body of Imam al-Hussein that touches the ground. And then as he is trying to get up, he actually comes and tries to use his sword to be able to stand up. Someone comes to Imam al-Hussein and throws a stone at his forehead, splitting his forehead open. And then someone comes and shoots him in the chest with an arrow. Lying on the ground, people start to throw stones at him. They start to abuse him. Imam al-Hussein calls out for some water. The enemy said to him, "We will never give you water until you meet Allah and your thirst is quenched in the fires of hell." Imam al-Hussein responded, "I swear by Allah, I swear by Allah, my grandfather will quench my thirst at the pool of Kawthar." I want you to imagine Imam al-Sajjad reciting that maqtal in the streets of Medina as those around him began to gather and listen to what happened to Hussein on the 10th of Muharram. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to hasten the appearance of Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam.